So welcome everyone to the 11th webinar session on the issue of interaction in second and foreign language teaching and learning. We're particularly glad today to welcome our colleague and friend, Professor SBAIHI, whose knowledge and experience in the field will enrich our knowledge about the importance of interaction and second language and foreign language teaching and learning. Professor SBAIHI is an associate professor and teacher trainer of the didactics of English in the Department of English at the Centre Régional des métiers de l'éducation et de la formation, CRMEF, in France. He obtained a PhD in applied linguistics from Sidi Mohamed bin Abdullah University in 2011. He is currently teaching different courses at the CRMEF, like didactic productions, planning the teaching and learning process, teacher development and reflective teaching and research methodology. He's also teaching different modules in different MA programs at the Faculty of Letters and Human Sciences, the the first module is research methods and applied linguistics, which he's teaching at the master program Language, Communication and Society. And the other module he's teaching is language teaching and learning. This is a module he's teaching in the MA program, Applied Language Studies and Research in Higher Education. He's also a teacher of English at Elkarfa University in Fès. He's also involved in different research projects in the research laboratory of Culture, Représentation, Éducation, Didactique et Ingénierie de la Formation, qui est DIF, at Sidi Mohamed bin Abdullah University. His research interests include teacher training, learner autonomy, ICT, action research, citizenship education, and didactics of English. Welcome, Professor SBAIHI. So as we agreed, I would give the floor first to the students who are going to give a presentation on the issue of interaction in second and foreign language teaching and learning. The floor is yours. Yes?
Yes, thank you. Would you please share your screen, my dear colleague, please?
Thanks a lot. Yes. Can you hear me first? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks. All right. Can you share my screen?
Can you please introduce yourself, Mr. Muhtassin?
Yes.
Yes.
Idris Muhtassin.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Can you introduce him? Yes.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm Idris Muhtassin. I study at University of Mohammed bin Abdullah, master program Applied Language Studies and Research in Higher Education. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Abderrahim Elkarfa for his initiative of creating this webinar series for us as students to learn and to benefit from our experts here in this field of study. Thanks go to Slawi, Professor Slawi, for moderating and for making it possible as well and contributing to this webinar series. We are grateful to have you, Prof. Belghiti and Professor Mohamed SBAIHI. I'm very delighted to see you and to have this opportunity to listen to you and be part of this webinar. Thanks a lot for giving me the floor, Professor Belghiti, and thanks to my classmates and all participants that are who are present today. Thanks a lot for our professors as well who are taking part of this webinar series. Well, in today's presentation, we're going to discuss the issue of interaction in second and foreign language teaching and learning. Our presentation as students will be brief and not as much as detailed. And hopefully it will serve as just an introduction to Dr. and Professor Mohamed SBAIHI. Um, um, so let's go ahead with the outline. So we'll begin with an introduction and the definitions of classroom interaction, the strategies, types of classroom interaction, and the participants who take part in that. The role of interaction in second and foreign language classroom, and the objectives. Very easy one, I think. We will conclude. That's for the outline. So to begin with, we all agree that classroom interaction plays a vital role in the effectiveness of any pedagogy, method, and approach to language teaching and learning. Interaction in language classroom between teacher and students is primarily related to how the teacher uses language to check students' comprehension. However, the teachers, mostly as initiators of interaction and communication, have several considerations underpinning their preferences in the classroom. Learning objectives and materials discussed in the classroom may bring different modes of interaction. Moreover, context in the classroom can probably give indirect effect to how teachers achieve communication and interaction. From a theoretical framework, we can see clearly that the basis of this area of study comes from Heim's communicative competence, Krashen's learning theory of comprehensive input, and Swain's output hypothesis. They all contribute immensely to the emergence of classroom interaction as an area of research. As a result, it is considered multi-faceted issue that is indeed worthy of study. For definition, the definition of classroom interaction, I relied here on two important, I see them important definitions for that term. Elise 1990 states that interaction is meaning focused and carried out to facilitate the exchange of information and prevent communication breakdowns. That is, Elise here wants to say that interaction inside the classroom relies heavily on communication. It is the crucial link between the participants who are involved in the learning operation. For Brown joins him, and Brown 2007 joins him on that and asserts that interaction is the basis of L2 learning, through which learners engage both in enhancing their own communicative abilities and in socially constructing their identities through collaboration and negotiation. That is to say, interaction is the essence of foreign and second language learning, as it provides a space for students to acquire and sharpen their social and communicative skills, which are needed for successful real-life communication. Classroom interaction has types, and Van Der in 1988 classifies them and lays them out for us. And he sees that the type 1, which is less topic oriented, less activity orientation. Interaction, the student can talk about whatever they want to, observing social rules. For example, small talk, private conversation in pairs, and so on. Type 2, more topic orientation, less activity orientation. And this type of interaction this type of interaction is found when a topic or a task is given by the teacher and the group attempts to solve it in any possible way. For example, instructions, explanations, lectures, and other materials. Type 3, more topic orientation, more activity orientation. Some information needs to be transmitted according to certain rules. This interaction takes place when both the topic and the rules of its management are controlled by the teacher. For example, for instance, whole class discussions of a text conducted by the teacher, communicative grammar exercises, interviews. And the last step, if the teacher controls the rules of the activity by the topic is irrelevant. We have here what Van Leer classifies as a type 4 interaction. Less topic orientation, more activity orientation. These 4 types of interaction actually take place in the classroom and are determined by the roles of the participants, the tasks accomplished, and the type of knowledge they exchange. Moving on, strategies of promoting classroom interaction. In a recent study done by Gia, she found that there are 5 strategies that can promote classroom interaction. And they are as follows: improving questioning strategies, the attention of the teacher to the learners can activate the teacher-learner interaction. The teacher should ask the question that can be answered by the learners, then the teacher adapt his questions to the levels or abilities of the learners. Another strategy, attending to learners' linguistic level. The activities should offer different language level to different learners. The used material reflects the unique needs of those learners at the level they have reached. Implementing cooperative learning means or refers to working cooperatively can help the development of learners' social skills. It alludes to the fact that every member of the group is included and differences among group members are resolved by the group members themselves. Building positive teacher-learner rapport. Mutual respect between teacher and learners is essential part of education. The dynamic qualities of classroom learning need the responsibility from both of the teacher and the learner. The last strategy is reducing classroom anxiety, which means that the teacher helps the learners to boost their self-esteem and self-confidence and create comfortable and non-threatening environment. That's it for my part. Thanks for your attention. And let me give the floor to Manel for the rest of the presentation.
Yes, thank you so much. I will try to share my screen right now. So yeah, in this part, we are going to talk about the directions of communication inside the classroom. So we have first, teacher and student interaction. The teacher and student interaction happens when teachers who have positive interaction with their students create classroom environments more helpful to learning and to meet students' developmental, emotional, and educational needs. It also means transforming the classroom into a learner-oriented one where the student has the free space to use and to experiment with the language through mutual interaction with the teacher for accomplishing a task or through discussion and question-answer sessions that help immensely in evaluating the learner's level. Then we have the student interaction. Let me make the screen first. And then we have the student-student interaction, which means how well students communicate with one another in a class. Classes where students have opportunities to communicate with each other help students effectively construct their knowledge. When in a classroom setting, this interaction happens naturally as students listen to each other's comments and ask each other questions and build rapport through frequent contact. The last direction is the student-content interaction, which is the interaction between a student and the content to be learned, including reading a textbook or completing an activity. It also happens in online learning environments. For example, in this webinar, we have the 3 directions. We can comment on each other, which is the student-student interaction. Also, we can interact with teachers, which is the teacher-student interaction. We have also the opportunity to react on the content in the lecture, which is the student-content interaction. Well, as we all know, before adopting any new technique or method, the first question that we ask ourselves is, what is the role and the objective of this new way of teaching and learning? Is it going to play any significant role in the teaching learning process? Or is it going to be helpful for students and learners to acquire the target language quickly, easily, and effectively? Because this is the most important thing for every second or foreign language teacher. Well, yeah. That's why, according to Krashen's theory of comprehensible input and Swain's emphasis on output, focuses on the role played by classroom interaction in second language acquisition. In Krashen's theory of second language acquisition, he states that acquisition requires meaningful interaction in the target language, which is a natural communication in which speakers are concerned not with the form of their utterances, but with the messages they are conveying and understanding. Swain, which is the most influential figure for the output hypothesis, has argued that comprehensible output also plays an essential part in second language acquisition. She pointed out that thanks to the feedback, the learners learn some new language, and that the comprehensible input alone is insufficient to second language learning process. According to Swain, comprehensible output can advance the accuracy and the fluency of language use because the learners can realize their mistakes and then correct them guided by their teachers. About the objectives of interaction in second and foreign language classrooms, we have that this practice helps the teacher to assist students with their questions and doubts. It will also help the learners identify their own learning methods, will guide them to communicate with their peers easily and create a meaningful communication among each other in their target language. It will also open the doors for learners to come face to face with the various types of interaction in which they engage with texts and sources that reflect language and culture in context. It also engages learners in tasks that deepen their experience and understanding of the target language and culture. It also promotes reflection on language and culture that the learner is using. To conclude, it is very important and it's doubtful. It's not, with no doubt that classroom interaction has a lot of benefits. Besides the amelioration of students' level, it encourages them to work in teams, to interpersonal, and it encourages them to be skillful in using the language to help them get the self-confidence they need. It also helps them to know how to negotiate. And it is really important, and we should see it in our classes. Though it's so hard for the large numbers or the groups that students are very, there are a lot of students in some groups for the BA, but it is applicable in the MA classes. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dries Mubtasim and Manal Mahjoubi. Thank you for your informative and presentation. So I would like to open the floor for questions, comments from the professors, our colleagues, and students, of course.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Professor SBAIHI.
Good. Thank you, Professor Abderrahim, for giving me the opportunity for sharing this online webinar with professors and students. Now, I should congratulate Mr. Dries Mubtasim and Ms. Manal Mahjoubi for their insightful presentation on learner centeredness, and particularly talking about the issue of interaction in the foreign language classroom and link it with the acquisition learning approach according to Krashen theory, the input hypothesis, the output hypothesis, the affective. You did not perhaps talk about the affective, but you focus on interaction and the role of inputs in the language classroom. Now, you cannot, no one can deny the importance of interaction in the development of language competency. Now, without interaction with others, we cannot develop, we cannot practice. And if we cannot practice, we cannot progress. Therefore, interaction is very important. Now, from the learner-centered perspective, I think opportunity should be given to students to initiate talk in class, and the teacher is only to help, not always to intervene. So I think you are the patient, and you should look for the okay. So I think students are in need. If you need something, you have to ask for it. Okay. So therefore, we cannot go on spoon feeding students and imposing things on these students. Students should be given this opportunity to ask things they need in class. Of course, teachers are there to support, are to help. Now, for the amount of talk in class, of course, if we are for this learner centeredness, as you have suggested, I think there should be this less and less student talk compared to teacher talk. So less TTT and more STT. STT is student talking time in the language classroom. So of course we should give the more opportunities for students to interact in the language classroom. Now talking this about the use of different modes of interactions in the language classroom, mainly pair work and group work. I think they are good because they are meant for just not only promoting the speaking skill or the but also promoting some citizenship values and behaviors. I think you could mention the way these pair work interactions and group work opportunities can decrease this anxiety among students. I think it's important in the sense that students can meet and they have confidence in each other more than their professors, and they can share things, they can share issues, and therefore they can have this confidence and security, and they can negotiate more and more and better, and therefore they can promote the linguistic as well as cultural competencies in the language classroom. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor SBAIHI. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback you gave to the students. I'm sure that they will benefit a lot from it. Yes, any other questions, any comments?
Yes, Professor Bluity.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I just want to, I have a little comment on Mahjoubi's presentation or part. She talked about the input hypothesis of Krashen, and we know that the input hypothesis has to do with acquiring the language. I mean of any language, any foreign language. And my question is, can we talk about the input hypothesis or the comprehensible input in the Moroccan classrooms? Because in the comprehensible input or the input hypothesis, the interaction is not important, because since the input is comprehensible, so there is no need of interaction. And even though even if the silent period takes a long time, because according to Krashen, if the input is comprehensible, so this is all. There is no need to the interaction in the classroom. So can we talk about the comprehensible input in Moroccan classrooms?
Yes, I will give you the example of the primary schools, I mean the private one, where, could you please, Professor Bluity, mute your mic?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I said that I can give you the example of primary schools, the private ones here in Morocco. We find that very young students, they are learning foreign languages in a very young age, which means that the comprehensible input in this period is on. They are ready to acquire the target language, so they are hearing a lot, and the teachers are giving them just like songs or anything that they can read by heart and then just keep repeating it, just to have the language and to acquire the skill of talking a foreign language. Thank you.
Yes.
I think I didn't satisfy your needs.
No, my question is interaction important within the framework of comprehensible input hypothesis, or the input hypothesis? Is it important within this theory?
Now I got you, yes. Because Krashen theory has talked only about the input hypothesis. Then Swain came and said that it is not really sufficient to talk about just the input alone. we should talk also about the output. And now we have the interaction. When you listen to someone and you react to his ideas, and then you have the interaction. This is, I mean, I think that I have answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, any other questions? Comments, maybe?
Yeah, what about students?
Yeah.
Don't you have questions?
Hello, everyone.
Do you have
Yes,
a
Professor.
clear understanding of what the interactionist hypothesis or approach is?
Yes, somebody
Students
wanted to
would like
talk?
to hear your voices. Mhm.
Yes.
Is Professor Belghiti?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ilham. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Amal Mahjoubi and Dries, for your great and to the point presentation. Indeed, I like it. So I have just two comments to Madam Mahjoubi. I mean, you talked about the objectives of interaction in classrooms. There are many indeed, that will help the learners to identify their own learning methods, that will guide the learners to communicate with their peers easily and creative, meaningful communication among each other in their target language and so on and so forth. I have just, is there any studies that justify what you said about this purpose, or you? I need the justification. I mean, is there any studies talks about this? Any references? I hope that you get my point.
Yes, dear Ilham,
Yes,
I got
Mother?
your point. I can provide you with the sources later on the group, okay? And you can read more
Okay.
about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes. Other questions? Ahmed?
Karima,
Yes.
can I please address a question to
Sure, Professor.
yes, to Mr. Mubtasim? Thank you very much, Karima.
Sure.
Yeah, you talked, Mubtasim, about the strategies of promoting classroom interaction, and you referred to JIAD 2013, and you talked about the 5 strategies of promoting classroom interaction. You talked about improving question strategies, adding to the learner's linguistic level, implementing cooperative learning, building positive teacher-learner rapport, and reducing classroom anxiety. Which one of these strategies you think is the most effective? And how can the teacher reduce classroom anxiety in normal classroom interaction, and also in e-learning interaction in e-learning platforms like what we are doing now? Okay, thank you. So the question is addressed to both speakers, Manal and also Dries Mubtasim. Thank you.
Yes, Melandris?
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Professor SBAIHI.
Yeah, welcome.
I think it's a very important question because regarding this situation we are in, of course, interaction has become difficult to achieve through just virtual spaces like this.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the strategies we can reducing classroom anxiety. Reducing classroom anxiety is important as well as other strategies, and the teacher can just can rebuild self-confidence and self-esteem of the students and make them as much as you can at ease by providing an environment that can help them develop in that direction. I think by group work as well, it can work, and other techniques are to be used actually. And I think Madam Hajoubi, you are sharing the screen once again. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, those are the references. So one of the important or the most important strategy, I guess, is the teacher learner rapport. The teacher should and the learner should build rapport based on mutual respect, I guess, because it's no communication can be done unless this is achieved. And with the very simple techniques, we can implement that. Just for example, when the teacher enters the room, it say she or he says good morning, and they respond. And when the teacher does something in the class and makes it like not jokes but a humorous atmosphere, sometimes from time to time, this makes it very easy to build rapport between the teacher and the student. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Muftasim. Yes, for your pertinent answers and reactions. Thank you.
It's an honor.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Yes, yes, please.
Yes, Ayub.
Yes, my name is Ayub. Yes, I want to answer the question of Professor Suad Slawi too. So if you want to promote the interaction between the teacher and the students in any classroom, regardless of its level, we should focus more on the anxiety level, which is the most important aspect. Because like my dear classmate Dries said, if the teacher is more friendly or acts in a very friendly way, he will notice that the interaction will develop and will become more fluent in the classroom while having a lesson. And also we know that many introvert students, the level of introvert students in Moroccan classroom is very high. So sometimes it may exceed 45% of the students are introvert. So how can we push an introvert student to interact if the classroom is very anxious and the atmosphere is very harsh? So for example, in high school classrooms, some games, some activities, some cultural based activities. For example, you ask your students, imagine you are in a coffee shop. This kind of questions, the imagine questions, like imagine you are in a coffee shop and you meet your friend, what would you use to invite him to your house or something like that? Promotes the interaction in a very good way. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ayub.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dear Professor,
Yes.
I just would like to have a kind of a proposition to what has been, or the question that has been mentioned by Professor Slawi. I believe, yes, I believe that students should have I think, more or less like.
You have muted yourself.
Your mic is mute.
Mr.
Yeah,
Azarkan, we can't
okay.
hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, good.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, my idea is concerned with clubs. Like I think given the high number of students that we can really notice in the Moroccan AFL classes, particularly in universities, I think the idea of clubs can really reduce the anxiety, specifically public speaking clubs, because I've been through this experience. Different faculties affiliated to the University of Mohamed bin Abdullah in different faculties, the faculty of architecture, the faculty of engineering here in FAS, for example. And I think this idea has really helped students to confront their stage fear. So I think practicing on how to publicly speak and how to confront audience, because it's not, if you consider the environmental zone of the class, it's not related only to the professor. So the students, when the student stands up, they are surrounded by all of their classmates. So I think they do not feel at ease because they are not really acquainted and they are not familiar with the kind of atmosphere. So I think such idea of clubs would really help. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Professor, can you
Yes. Sure. Can you please raise the volume of your mic?
Okay, yes.
We don't hear you
Right.
very well.
I'm trying to do that. Do you hear me now? Yes.
Better.
Yes, regarding this idea of in fact engaging students in free tension atmosphere and free tension activities, there are of course plenty of suggestions, and it's easy to talk about the shoulds and should nots. However, application or applicability is not as easy as it sounds when we face the real situations. Of course, there are challenges, and these challenges are in fact possible. We can do our best to solve and in fact better the situation by engaging students all levels, either in student interaction or student-teacher interaction or student-material interaction. I think there are some tips of that change can start with the thoughts and with reflections on ways of how we can relate this to the personalized situations and the classroom context. Of course, learners are not the same. Classroom environment is not the same. The teachers, profile is not the same. This is there are a lot of issues that are in stake. And regarding how to get students out of their comfort zone, of course, there are plenty of activities like starting with tongue twisters and probably jokes, some riddles. Why not some songs, and trying sometimes from time to time to get students to the court and try to you engage, involve students in sort of rows where they have question, answer, and they can interact with each other outside the classroom. If this is possible, of course, there are a lot of constraints regarding this point. That's all for my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes? Yes, other questions, other comments?
Yes, please, Professor.
Yes, Iman?
Thank you first for the very insightful presentation. Thank you, Professor Mohamed, for being part of these webinars. So my question is, how can we engage students in dialogic interactions in online platforms just like in Zoom meeting we're having right now? And do you think that online platforms are perceived to create a friendly environment in comparison with face-to-face classrooms? Thank you very much.
Yes, Dries and Manan?
If Manan doesn't have, would you like to react, Manan?
Yes, thank
Go ahead.
you, dear Iman, for your question. Well, yes, we can talk about online interaction with not very young people. We can talk about adults like MA students, for example. So the interaction, your question was whether the online interaction is the same with the real interaction or not. Am I right?
Yes, does it create like a friendly atmosphere for students and teachers?
Well, personally talking, it is a bit harder to talk online because we are not digital natives. It's a new technology that we are not really used to. So we might find some difficulties in the online conferences or meetings, but the interaction, the real interaction is much better for me, I think. And we should look for, it needs research to have an answer for this question.
Yeah, but it would be sufficient to say that clearly we are seeing that nothing can replace interpersonal, physical, face-to-face interaction, because simply we cannot neglect the non-verbal aspect of interaction, because again it's very important to see how the person reacts with his gestures and face expressions. But again, it's not the same like virtually done and physically, I think, in real world done. Yeah, I think it's not a hindrance, but we might need a little bit more effort to achieve interaction easily and effectively in the virtual world. I think that's not a satisfying answer, but again,
it is a satisfying answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Otherwise, we can probably move to Professor SBAIHI's presentation.
Something perhaps related
Professor
to...
KARFA?
Okay. Professor
Yes, Professor SBAIHI?
Yeah, I just want to add something to react to what Iman Silami talked about relating to the use of online platforms for promoting this interaction. Is it the same or different? I guess nothing can replace face-to-face interaction. You are near people, you can feel, you can see people. That's different. But online, but new technologies all the time, they can add a lot. They can add a lot. They can be used as alternatives. They can be used for more support to the language classroom and for the language, for the foreign language, for the English. In our case, I think new technologies can help a lot. I think whether you can opt for synchronic or asynchronous interactions, I think they help a lot for practice. And I think people can feel more secure and more meaningful. I think there is also a difference maybe in the language classroom, the text, the dialogues that are provided, the texts that are provided that are for reading, for learning purposes, for teaching learning purposes, but not for communicative purposes. Therefore, I think online they are more natural, more meaningful, more real. The audience, I think you are exposed to varieties.
I think free as well for students who are reluctant to participate. It could help in this aspect as well. Yeah.
It can help a lot if people have preset objectives, of course. If you have set objectives, they can benefit from that. I'm sure they can learn a lot from these online platforms. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Yes, I was saying, yes.
Yes, I think we moved on to the Professor SBAIHI's presentation, yes?
Yes, yes. Yes, Professor SBAIHI.
So,
the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to share the first.
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Professor Luriti, for your introduction. And I'm very pleased to meet you all, dear professors, friends, and colleagues at the University of Harlem, as the students, the master students in this master program, and all the attendees here in this very highly respected institute, and all the people online connecting with us and following this webinar presentation. Now, I would like first to thank in particular your master program, program for this initiative that you have taken to provide to go on with these series of webinars on issues on applied linguistics. And for today, I've joined and I'm taking part and with this presentation on the same thing, and always on issues in applied linguistics. It's not that different from what Miss Iman, Miss Mahjoub, sorry, Manal Mahjoubi, and Chris Mubtasim for on learner-centeredness. It's always about learner-centeredness, but I will be very specific this time, talking about learner-centered and how students can assume responsibility in for their own learning, and they will be talking about autonomous learning for learner development. I assume that students at University of Harlem are autonomous, but they still need to develop this autonomy for development. Of course, during this presentation, I will be going through the following points: definition of learner autonomy, the need for learner training, the learner-based approach to autonomy, the technological approach to autonomy, and of course, and that's it. Now, of course, to start with, I can say that I have to activate the program.
The screen is shaky. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Mickey?
Yeah, I'm going to.
Yeah, something wrong with the PowerPoint. Maybe with the mouse.
Can you see it now?
It's not. Yeah. Now, yes.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
No,
Yeah,
it's
now
fine. Yes.
Fine. Fine. Good.
But it keeps switching to.
All right. Now you can see me now. It's okay. It's stable enough.
No.
Not yet.
There's a problem with this screen.
Your inbox. You have to close your inbox. Your email.
Email?
Yes, your email is figuring out on the screen. Votre boîte de réception, voilà. You close your Yahoo or Gmail or whatever you are using.
This one?
Yes, yes. Close it, please, because it is serving. Yeah.
Okay.
Just open the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now that's fine. That looks
Okay
good.
now?
Yes, I think now it's okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Slawi.
Yes.
All right. So as I said, I will be talking about learner autonomy for more autonomy, I said, for students, not just students of Darmadas, but students, university students in general. So my focus will be on university students, but of course, as I said, I assume that you are autonomous to some extent, but we still need to develop in the country. And of course, I would suggest some approaches, and mainly two approaches: the learner-based approach and the technology-based approach. Now, the choice of this topic on learner autonomy, as I said, for learner development is motivated by so many reasons. Now, for me, you cannot expect people to grow as active and responsible citizens in the society if they cannot develop this independence at home and at school and at university. So in this presentation, as I said, I will be making this link between the autonomous practices and development of students, not just at university, but at university and also outside. Because, of course, I believe that students cannot develop on their own. It's something acquired, but there are things that need to be trained, and of course, we need to offer opportunities for students, opportunities inside the language classroom, but also outside. Of course, there are challenges, but for people with the collaboration of all parties, I think teachers and you can overcome.
Excuse me, Professor SBAIHI?
Yes.
Could you please mute your mics, Nikki?
All the mics?
Yes.
Yes, because there's
we can
hear noise.
Yeah,
the mic
you leave
Professor
only the
SBAIHI,
mic of
please.
Professor SBAIHI. Yeah, that's
okay.
Yes, please.
And the screen is still shaking. I don't know why the PowerPoint presentation is not showing.
Yeah, Professor SBAIHI, can you close all the programs open in your computer? Because all what we can see is a shaking computer screen.
Now, all are closed. Now, everything is closed.
Now I think it's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right now?
Yes.
All right. Good. So as I said,
the same problem again, Professor. I don't know.
The same problem?
Yeah.
Can I reduce this again?
I guess there is a problem with the windows that are open.
Can you see this? Is it okay now?
There is more than one program open.
No, I don't have any programs open.
I think there is a button in your keyboard which is blocked. Maybe control button in your keyboard.
Yeah, I think so.
I cannot see any control button. And they don't have any files open.
I can see some pages open over there, Professor. Yahoo.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, I've closed this here.
I think the only solution is to restart your computer and to open only the PPT. Because there are some programs which are open.
Close it. Yeah, I will close. students.
Can you please, Professor Karima, take up some further questions if the students ever can have?
Yeah.
The professor.
Yeah. If there are any other questions while waiting for
comments or whatever.
Baihi to come back.
Yeah.
This is why face-to-face interaction is much better than online.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need the.
Okay, all right. Yes, Professor
yes, Professor. Yes, Professor KARFA.
Yeah, I may talk for a while waiting for Professor
SBAIHI to join. Yes, good idea.
Sure, yes. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I would like to express my deepest thanks. First, congratulations to our students, Idris Mubtasim and Manal Mihjoubi, for summarizing some important defining principles and aspects of the interactionist approach to second and foreign language teaching and learning. I would like to extend a big thank you to our colleagues. First, Professor Slawi, for the continuous effort she is investing in these webinars. Professor Karima Belghiti for joining us once again today and for moderating this seminar in spite of her very busy agenda. And our wonderful friend and colleague, Mohamed SBAIHI, for accepting to join us and to cope with some technical difficulties. I would like to express deepest thanks to Professor Yusuf Tamer from Ibn Zahar University, Professor Atiq Asdin from Euromed University here in Fez, Professors and friends Madani, Qali, Urdu, and Professor Amkran, Professor Jami, C. Ben Dawood Nadif, and all the colleagues who are joining us today and who have joined us with our series. Also, I would like to thank our PhD students who are attending these webinars and enriching the discussion, encouraging us. I would like to let Professor Slawi know that a number of colleagues have contacted me, congratulating you and me and our students for this webinar.
Thank you very much.
A number of them.
It's a great pleasure.
For example, Imad Arbi and Miski Mohammed and colleagues from Agadir, others. Okay, they are congratulating the team of this master program, Applied Language Studies and Research in Higher Education, for sharing this course on issues in applied linguistics and for making this course public and for sharing the debate and the discussion and the experience of colleagues from different institutions of higher education in Morocco. Okay, I will try to, in my presentation, to briefly present a historical background. I want to go back, don't worry, I will not go back to behaviorism and Chomsky, and some of the core issues defining the interactionist hypothesis or approach to second and foreign language teaching and learning. I think we have to go to the beginning of the 1970s once again. Beginning of the 1970s, in 1971, interest in the in interaction and the nature of interaction taking place in second and foreign language classrooms began. What were the most important aspects of interaction focused on at this time? First, the focus was on foreigner talk and caretaker talk. Foreigner talk in second and foreign language teaching and learning, and caretaker talk in first language acquisition. The research areas at the time focused on the types of discourse patterns found in native speaker and learner conversations. And here we have to underline the term discourse. It is one term, but once again, we have to make the connection with the emergence of discourse analysis in different fields, and the classroom discourse or foreign language discourse. Discourse patterns found in native speaker and learner conversations. The focus, I said, was on the examination of foreigner talk and the ways in which native speakers modified their speech so as to make it more accessible for learners. Almost the same applies to the examination of caretaker talk, and once again, the way in which parents, caretakers, modify for young children. And these adjustments are defining elements of what the interactionist approach was, because what he say is a bit different. The first widely quoted and referred to in this respect is Ferguson, 1971. And everyone knows that Ferguson is essentially a sociolinguist. A sociolinguist, to show you the influence of discourse analysis and sociolinguistics and conversational analysis, okay, on the emergence of the interactionist hypothesis. For the care talk researchers in this area argued that modifications, these are some, just a brief summary of the findings of research on caretaker talk and foreigner talk. They found that modifications and adjustments serve to make the input more comprehensible to second language to learners. And in this way, when the input becomes comprehensible, it facilitates, it promotes, and enhances the development of the L2 and the acquisition of L2. This is important for us and for students, because when the term input and comprehensible input is mentioned, it is always associated with correction, which is not the case. There had been developments and evolutions in this respect before the introduction of Krashen's input hypothesis and other theories. Then the second stage of evolution in the history of the interactionist approach or hypothesis happened or emerged by the end of the 1970s. Particularly Krashen's contribution and his two contributions in 1977 and 1980. In these two publications, Krashen focused on input and comprehensibility. And he found that comprehensible input promotes language acquisition. According to Krashen's hypothesis, input that is comprehensible, but slightly above the learner's current level of proficiency, was or is the driving force behind language acquisition. In Krashen's view, if a learner is exposed to this type of input, that is the level of proficiency +1, and at the same time this is the addition of Krashen, and at the same time the learner has a low affective filter, low levels of anxiety and negative feelings associated with learning the L2. What happens? Acquisition of the non-native language would subconsciously take place, which we usually refer to as acquisition. Then, after Krashen's first versions of the input hypothesis, there was a shift from the focus on foreigner talk or caretaker talk and the direct impact of the comprehensible input on learning, on acquisition. There was a shift to the focus on interaction itself. On interaction itself, the nature of interaction, patterns of interaction, what makes interaction conducive to L2 and foreign language learning and acquisition. This third stage of evolution in the development of the interactionist hypothesis held that and made clear that the relationship between language and communication, the focus was on the relationship between language and communication if we are looking for explanations for the learning process. So the focus on the interaction itself and the learning process. So we had a shift from the focus on the two extremes or dichotomies, foreigner talk and its influence on X, to the that is, which was product oriented, then a shift to understanding the process of teaching as with a focus on the process that is process oriented. And of course, many studies were conducted in the 1970s. For example, Wagner, Gap, and Hatch 1975, and Hatch 1978 A and B, who Hatch argued that interacting might be an actual site. So this is the shift from foreigner talk and critical talk as a site, as an area of research, to interaction itself, which might be an actual site for L2 learning and not just a means of what had already been learned, that is the product. And in this respect, Hatch clearly argues that one learns how to do conversation. One learns how to do conversation, and the verb to do here, that is to practice, to engage in conversation. One learns how to interact verbally, and out of the interaction, syntactic structures are developed. That is, here, priority is given to students' engagement in interaction. Not only listening to comprehensible input, adjusted or modified input, but the engagement in those adjustments in interaction itself. This is another aspect. And then the emergence, thanks to this, due to this development, the first version of the interactionist hypothesis that is associated with Long emerged by the very beginning of the 1980s, particularly Long, 1980, 1981. In Long's view, to be brief, both comprehensible input and L2 development stem from the conversational modifications that occur when native speakers and non-native speakers work to solve a communication difficulty. So here, once again, we have a process-oriented view on perspective on communication and interaction. To make this view on communication clear, we usually refer to it as interactive communication. And Long suggests in these publications that these modifications, that is the adjustments and modifications that characterize interaction, these modifications and interactional adjustments during negotiation of meaning for meaning were positioned to promote comprehensible input. Okay, so here we have something different. It is not only sufficient to produce a comprehensible input, okay, to foster language acquisition. So the question is about what makes the input comprehensible. It is not the teacher who should adjust, okay? Students' engagement in interaction contributes to making the input comprehensible. So it is not the job of the teacher, the practitioner, to produce input which is comprehensible, but the input becomes comprehensible only through the participation of students and their engagement. They make input more comprehensible. In addition to these stages of development, early research using the interactionist approach framework, because here we have parallel lines of development, theorizing and research framework. They focused on the description of the frequency and type of
KARFA, please.
Yeah. Yeah, Professor
Can you
Slawi?
please repeat? We can't hear you. We couldn't hear you for a few seconds. Can you please recapitulate just the last two sentences? Yeah, I'm so.
Yeah, the first version of Long's interactionist hypothesis, and it was referred to as a hypothesis, okay, focused on the characteristics which make the input comprehensible. And he differentiated between the traditional understanding of the input and the production of input as the responsibility of the practitioner. That is, teachers should have sort of understanding of the level of policy of students, and he or she should add 1 + 1, okay, to make it comprehensible. And of course, to make it comprehensible, and of course, the emergence of discourse analysis stabs, for example, stabs conducted great research on classroom discourse at the same time, okay? So now the shift after Long's hypothesis, there was a shift of focus from the influence of comprehensible input on language acquisition to the description of the examination of the nature, what makes the input comprehensible itself. And of course, research by the very beginning of the 1980s focused on the frequency and type of interactional modifications used in native speaker, learner, and learner-learner pairings. That is, we shifted the focus on what makes comprehensible input. Then, in addition to this description, research also focused on the examination of the relationship between negotiation of meaning and learner's comprehension. That is the focus on the role of students' participation and meaning negotiation and collaboration, and their participation in interactive communication, the focus on meaning negotiation and learning comprehension, learner's comprehension. That is, learners, the relationship between learners' participation in interactive communication, learners' use of their own strategies to negotiate meaning, its influence on not on language acquisition, but on the comprehensibility of the input. Here we have another variable, learners, another research variable. That is learners' negotiation of meaning, learners' participation, not only the teacher who should assume the responsibility of creating comprehensible input. There are other variables, research variables. So the relationship between negotiation of meaning and learners' comprehension, that is the comprehensibility of the input. And a third point that research focused on during the beginning of the 1980s, the comparison between the effects of pre-modified and interactionally modified input. So here we have two types of adjustment that produced by the first of interactionist perspective, and the interactionally modified input, that is input which is modified and adjusted as a result of the teachers and learners in interaction. And I don't want to cite studies such as Dafty and Peka, 1986, Gass and Veronis, 1985, 1986, Long, 1983A, Locci, 1994, Peka and Dafty, a number of studies. Because once again, the new ideas brought about by the interactionists by Long, supported of course by Russian, okay, they provided a theoretical framework, good theoretical framework, and new questions, and of course this gave the result to a number of studies, research areas and questions, research questions, and lines of research. One criticism leveled against this initial version of Long's interactionist hypothesis, the criticism focused on the descriptive nature and the quantitative nature of the model developed by Long and the studies it resulted in. The criticism here leveled against Long's framework is that Long and the studies conducted within his framework did not study to find direct evidence that interaction was causally linked to L2 acquisition. That is, they failed because the focus, once again, was on what makes, once again, although it was advanced, but on what makes the input comprehensible. So they did not make that link between teachers and students' participation, comprehensibility of input, and successful foreign language and second language acquisition and learning. And of course, these criticisms were leveled against those studies by some scholars who are very famous in the field of applied linguistics, including Mackey 1999 and Ellis 1999 and Speda and Lightman 2009. Then I think Menel mentioned Swain's output hypothesis. To make it brief, Swain's output hypothesis holds that comprehensible input is not enough. If it is not enough, it is not sufficient. Successful language acquisition and language learning requires students' participation. That is, they should participate, they should produce the language, they should write, they should speak, and they should, of course, read. That is the output, not only the input, but students' participation and their use of the language, of the target language for interactive, communicative, purposeful purposes in different situations and in different contexts, engaging them in different communication contexts is very important. It is more important than the comprehensible input. And I would like just to mention that behaviorism did not die. Huh? No, we don't have gaps. We talk about Chomsky revolution, but behaviorism continued shaping the emergence of new ideas. Because still here, in spite of the great advances, still the soul of behaviorism shaped the emergence of the interactionist hypothesis. That is when we say the comprehensible input, which is the role of the teacher. Okay, so the role of the teacher was still dominant. Anyway, for Swain's output hypothesis, in Swain's publication of 1985, this hypothesis posits the following: that producing output plays a crucial role, here I'm quoting Swain, in the development of the L2 because it gives learners the opportunity to practice and thus to automatize the production of the language. Second, it allows learners to test hypotheses concerning the L2. 3, it forces learners to focus on structure of the language. And 4, it draws learners' attention to gaps in their interlanguage. What should we pick up? Because we have to move. There have been shifts. I think we have to pick up to the fourth. The third and the fourth forces learners to focus on structure of the language, to focus on the structure of the language. And in the third goal, learners' attention. Focus, attention, two terms brought together, and they are extensively developed, comprehensively developed, and explained in one chapter of Vallier, 1996, while explaining awareness. And this is the emergence of a second wave of interest in language awareness. The term, the phrase focused attention is used throughout Vallier's book 1966 to 1996 to explain language awareness. In the following 2 slides, it will become clear. Another version of, I will try to, okay, so for Swain's output hypothesis, it was very important thanks to some defining terms that were integrated. And by the way, all these versions were not exclusive. They were integrated. Swain integrated the Krashen's contribution, Long's contribution to introduce the output hypothesis. Okay, so once again, the idea of comprehensible input being insufficient for second language acquisition was also discussed by White, well-known scholar, 1991, who states that approaching the role of input from a different theoretical perspective implies that comprehensible input is insufficient for certain aspects of L2 development. So for White, the comprehensible input hypothesis is not or should not be rejected, but it may not explain some aspects of the process of teaching and learning or some aspects of the language. And White argues that the construct of feedback, so we have something new, a development, we have focused attention, language awareness, and we have feedback. As you know, corrective feedback and the nature of corrective feedback, which was neglected for a while, for 2 decades, okay, due to the collapse of behaviorism and the prestige, other approaches, new approaches enjoyed during the 1970s and 1960s. But once again, we have the constructive feedback is very important to account, to explain how learners receive information about incorrect utterances. That is, the nature and the quality of corrective feedback is very important to make the input comprehensible and to help the production of more and more quality output. Further extensions of the interactionist hypothesis happened by the beginning of the 1990s. The most important defining research areas and questions and aspects behind this extension is first role in second language learning, the role of attention, the role of awareness. And of course, Mr. Woodbury comprehensively explained a number of related to language awareness last week. According, and we have another hypothesis, which is referred to as Schmidt's noticing hypothesis. Noticing hypothesis. That is the capacity of learners to note, to pay attention to some aspects of language. According to this noticing hypothesis, introduced by Schmidt, subconscious language learning, that we usually refer to as acquisition. Subconscious language learning is impossible, according to Smith. It is impossible. And he argues noticing awareness is the necessary and sufficient condition, necessary condition and sufficient condition for converting input to intake. Smith, 1990, page 129. Smith also points out that L2 learners input processing. This word is important, processing. Here we have learners' human agency, not only receiving comprehensible input from teachers, but their own agency in the processing of the input. Processing strategies. Once again, the importance of students, learners, learning and processing strategies in making input comprehensible, and of course through their attention. So these learners' input processing strategies, Smith argues, might make certain portions of the L2 difficult to notice. Once again, he focuses on, of course, his hypothesis, noticing hypothesis, awareness. And according to him, researchers have come to argue and agree that L2 learners might benefit from having their attention drawn to formal features of the target language. Here, once again, we have the re-emergence of language awareness as an area, as a research area, and it has become, okay. So here we have attention, and because the prestige communicative language teaching enjoyed during the 1970s and 1980s and 90s was understood as a neglect of grammar and of language. So all these claims and the innovations concerning the interactionist approach to language teaching and learning were brought together within the scope, within as defining elements of the interactionist approach, or at least one of the latest versions of the interactionist hypothesis. Long, thanks to this developments at the level of research, practice, and theory, reformulated another version of the interaction hypothesis in 1996, drawing, of course, on the results and the methodologies of those studies conducted in the 1980s and the very beginning, the first 5 years of the 1990s. To summarize the new version of that Long himself reformulated and articulated, he states that negotiation for meaning, especially, he says, negotiation that triggers interactional adjustments by the native speakers or more competent instructor, facilitates acquisition because it connects input, internal learner capacities, particularly, he says, selective attention, and output in productive ways. So Long brought together those defining ingredients, elements, key defining elements together within, and of course they have within one definition of what he thought in 1996 the interactionist approach is or should be. I will now I will try to be brief. Just I will cite some the core issues, defining issues of the interactionist view. And I would like to quote Mackay 2007, who says that it is now, in 2007, commonly accepted within the second language acquisition literature that there is a robust connection between interaction and learning, and says that the interactionist approach, he summarizes, posits that the interactional work that occurs when a learner and his or her interlocutor encounter some kind of communication breakdown is beneficial for L2 development. That is, those communication difficulties and breakdowns that may characterize communication are important to make interaction conducive to learning. Why it is important? Because those difficulties, challenging difficulties and encounters make the participation, the integration of learners purposeful and challenging as well. And at moments of difficulties and challenges, the other ingredients that define that Long put in his 1996 definition, that is attention. Difficulties may attract learners' attention. Yes. I would summarize with the 3 or 4 core components. Okay, the core components of the interactionist approach, and they are the latest. They are interactionally modified input. Here, input, we have a precision. Interactionally modified input, not only modified input by the caretaker or by the teacher or by the foreigner. It depends on the kind of conversation study. The interactionally modified, that is input modified in the process of students and teachers' engagement in main negotiation and in solving problems related to communication breakdown, etc. Okay? Interactionally modified input. 1, having learner's attention drawn to his/her interlanguage and to the formal features of the L2, another defining ingredient, attention, language awareness. Opportunities 3, opportunities to produce output, the output hypothesis, and opportunity 4, opportunities to receive feedback. So all the most important defining elements in each model or in each version of the interactionist hypothesis have been brought together in one definition of what the interactionist approach to language teaching and learning is to in this millennium. So these are the most important. Okay, some 4 points about research agenda that define the research agenda, some elements which define researchers' focus today, and which, according to some scholars that I have reviewed, may define the near future. First, the first area or question is which aspect, that is the focus, is on which aspects of the L2 benefit the most from interaction. Another one, how individual difference variables mediate the relationship between interaction and L2 development. Another area or question is what forms of interaction are the most beneficial for L2 learners, and how various types of interactional feedback differentially impact various L2 forms. and many other questions. I hope I have, I'm sorry if I am late, but okay, I had to make this overview. Thank you very much once again, dear colleagues and students, for your attention, for your listening. Thank you very much.
Hello?
Yeah, there's a problem of
Karima?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you now.
Professor Karfa. We can hear you now.
Yes, we have my presentation. So
thank you so much, Professor
Professor
Karfa.
SBAIHI, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready,
Yes,
Professor Abderrahim. Yes, I'm ready. Yes, I can go on. But of course, now I'm waiting for the green light from Professor BAIHI.
Sure, Professor.
Yes,
yes,
you must, and you have to, and you should. Otherwise,
sure.
Yes.
It depends.
I would like first to
no contribution.
I would like first to thank Professor Karfa for the rich and very insightful overview you gave about the issue of interaction and how it emerged and how it evolved, the different stages of development, the theories, the hypotheses advanced, and how each one of them, or the implications of each one of them, of how interaction was understood and practiced in second and foreign language classrooms. Thank you so much, Professor Karfa, for this overview. So it's very enriching. Your mic, Professor Karfa. I think yes, Professor SBAIHI.
Yes, thank you, Professor BAIHI.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the floor. And me too, I would like to thank Professor Abderrahim Elkarfa for presenting, on comprehensive, on the hypothesis, Krashen's hypothesis postulated by mainly the comprehensible input and how it's linked to input linked to output, effective filter, and talking about negotiation and feedback. I think all these are very important, and perhaps as implications for the Moroccan classroom, I think this recalls us as teachers of English to reconsider our practices, to rethink our practices in our classrooms, and see how we can offer comprehensible input for our students, in the sense that it can be accessible to most of the students, but a little bit challenging, as Krashen says. Always this I+1, okay? I+1. Once it is acquired, you can add something. So just raising the bars from time to time, so that not to make the classroom very monotonous, and so that not to keep students attentive and motivated all the time. However, of course, in addition to that, the affective filter, of course, very important. Now, once teachers can lower anxiety, they can, of course, enhance the learning process. And the same thing for negotiation. Now, today we are talking about the negotiated syllabus. Now, once you negotiate with students, I think you learn from them, you understand their needs. This is how you can build on what they have so far, what they have acquired, and you can build on that. Now, for the feedback, I think it should be constructive, not deconstructive, so that to keep students motivated, and so that to encourage them for going further in the learning process. Thank you, Abderrahim. I really liked your insightful presentation. And now I move on to my presentation on learner autonomy. This is, yes. Okay, can you see now my presentation? All right?
Not yet.
Okay, Professor BAIHI?
Not yet.
Can you see it now?
No.
It's okay?
No, I can't see it.
You can't see it?
No. No.
Make sure you share the screen, Professor.
Oh.
Yes.
Did you share the
Can
screen?
you see it now? All right, I will.
No.
PowerPoint presentation. Can you see it now?
Now, yes, it is being shared now.
You can
it is on the it is on the
right. So
yes, now
okay.
Now we can.
Good.
Yes.
Very good. Great. 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 All right. It's all right now?
Yes.
It's okay? Okay, so yes. Nice to see you again. I'm sorry for the delay, but it was good for Professor Abderrahim Elkarfa to start and to move on with his presentation on Krashen's hypothesis. And it was very good to learn from him. Now, of course, I'm not very far from talking about the teaching learning process, but I'm focusing on students learning, the way students are supposed to go on with the learning process and to be at the center of this teaching learning process, and how they can take charge of this learning process. And if they can take charge of this learning process, of course, they may be able to develop as competent students in class at university, but also as responsible citizens outside the university boundaries. Now, for that purpose, I will be talking about the 4 points. I will not talk about how to promote autonomy before defining what learner autonomy is. I will also move on to the need for learner training. And of course, I will precisely talk about 2 approaches, mainly the learner-based approach to autonomy by Wind in 1991, and the technological-based approach to autonomy, which by Warshuwer 2010. Of course, I have so many motives for talking about this topic for dear students and professors at this for this webinar. Just because we cannot expect people to grow as active and responsible citizens in this society if we cannot develop it at home, at school, and at university. So I'm not saying that it should be promoted at university. It exists to some extent in so many of us. It should start from the home, but of course, as educators, we have an important role to play in this respect. Now, in this presentation, as I said before, I will be focusing on the link between autonomous learning and development, and the processes for promoting this autonomy in students, and perhaps the challenges that they may face. I'm talking about the need for more autonomy because so many of us here, students, teachers, researchers, and academics, share this concern and feel that it's needed today. It's needed today more than before. I think all of us who have experienced this need, especially during this hard times of this corona pandemic, where we could find ourselves inside our rooms, disconnected from people, disconnected from our professors, and disconnected from libraries, and we have to do something on our own. We have to struggle to find our way out, and therefore to proceed with the learning process. Now, of course, not, as I said, detached from our teachers, but of course, teachers were always there to support us. Of course, we cannot say totally, because learner autonomy is not this complete detachment, but of course, there's always this support from people outside, from parents, from professors, from the peers, from all people around us in this world. Now, I'm talking about more learner training is needed for this autonomy. Why? Because students may be intelligent, they may have certain skills, but may have a positive attitude, and also may have a very positive attitude toward being independent, but still they may not be able to manage the learning process on their own. I think there are some reasons behind that. Now, before we move on to talking about how we can promote this autonomous learning among students at the university level, I think I have to define first what autonomy is. Now, of course, there are so many definitions that you may face, that you may come across during while doing the review of the literature. And of course, all of us, or so many of us, can come across the famous Holick 1981, who defines learner autonomy as the ability to take charge of one's learning, page 3. So this is how it is defined by a holic, taking control or taking charge of the learning process. Here I'm saying that it does not mean working in isolation from others, because we are social human beings and we cannot be disconnected from people. We can always be meet with people, we can learn from people, interact with people. Abderrahim Elkarfa said that interaction with students, interaction with teachers, of course, all these promote the learning teaching process. So again, within this paradigm, we cannot deny the role of teachers, of peers in promoting this autonomous learning. However, all of them make use of possible tools and opportunities to take charge. I mean, we can benefit from these teachers around us, we can benefit from students, and we can benefit from the opportunities that are allowed, including the new technologies that we are using now, today. In other words, people can never say that they are, I said, they are fully independent, but they need to develop in the continuum according to, in the continuum. And according to Noonan 1997, so that language learners can move smoothly along this continuum, they have to go through 5 levels, according to Noonan, 5 levels or 5 degrees of autonomy. So first, awareness; second, involvement; intervention, creation, and transcendence. So all of us, we are somewhere in the continuum. We cannot say it's a yes or no issue, but we are autonomous to some extent. Students at this university, professors, all people are autonomous to some extent. So they are moving further. Now, learners can develop in this continuum according to what? According to their own convictions, to their motives, to the culture, that's the way they are brought up, and according to the type of opportunities they are offered. So we cannot say that people can develop this autonomy on their own. So it's a culture that they develop from kindergarten, from the first days in their lives. So I think they are observing their parents doing things for them. So how can you say that they can be independent if all parents are doing things for them? Now, if all teachers are spoon feeding them, so it's a culture, as I can say. It's also motive. It's also depends on the opportunities available. The textbook, I mean, the media that are available. Are they encouraging this autonomous learning or no? Or are they just bombarding us with information? So as to promote this autonomy, they need to encourage or to trigger what we call this interaction. It's through interaction people can learn by themselves and can develop this kind of autonomy and this kind of responsibility. Now, the idea of learner training for autonomy may be proposed here, just assuming that some students, if left on their own, may not be able to promote autonomy. And evidence for the need for more learner training can be supported from previous research. And here I can cite Professor Wakrim's study 2002 as an example, which states that some cases of failure at university, at the Moroccan university in particular, are related to inability of high school students to adapt to a more autonomous mode of learning once they get to university. So it's a question of adaptability. Since students come from high school and some of them may not be used to do things on their own, I'm sure they will find it difficult to go on with this independent mode of learning at university. I said not totally independent, but from depending on the kind of lectures they have, depending on the kind of subjects they are following, and depending on the conditions they are offered inside this university. So training is needed here. Why? Because we have to, I cannot expect people to develop this autonomy just on their own. We have to motivate them. We have to trigger their attitudes, because changing attitudes is very important. Because if some people may resist this autonomy for some reasons. Maybe they cannot. They are highly dependent on their teachers. It's, as I said, it's a culture they can bring. They bring with them from high school or from their homes. Therefore, I think teachers or professors at university should be careful with this, with these attitudes, and should do something with changing attitudes inside universities. So it can be suggested as an approach. Training can be suggested as an approach to success as university. It as success for lifelong learning and for all domains and for all time. So it is a remedy for all problems that can help people, they can support them in the learning process. At the same time, students can be offered training opportunities. So I think people or professors at university can start with this psychological training that is changing attitudes, and then can move on to what we call technical training, which is helping people develop certain strategies. So by talking about this technical training, I mean the learner-based approach according to Winden 1991. According to this Winden 1991, of course, 3 strategies are very important. They are not strategies for learning, but metacognitive strategies, strategies of learning how to learn, of conducting the learning process. And these 3 strategies, called also 3 self-managerial strategies, are very important in the sense that they allow students to reflect on what they study, assess difficulties, and make appropriate decisions for their own learning. These 3 strategies are, as I said, 3, and they are planning, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. Planning, we mean making decisions for what to study. Self-monitoring is about reflecting on what to study, and self-evaluation is making assessment. So I think if students are critical and they can rethink what they do, can assess their potentials, can assess the level of difficulty of the things they are studying, can assess the tools they have for learning, I am sure they can make correct and appropriate decisions for their own learning inside the university as well as outside. So I think it's based on all this assessment of all the conditions where we study, our own potentials, what we can do. Okay, I cannot do something that I cannot. It's beyond my reach. Of course, we have to make some kind of assessment before we make decisions. So I think it's based on that we can make these decisions for what to learn, how to learn, especially once if we can find ourselves, as I said, away from professors inside our homes during this time of coronavirus. Now today, in addition to this learner-based approach of Winden, I'm suggesting here another approach, which is the technology-based approach, according to World 2010, and it's precisely, it holds that if we allow people to use new technologies, I'm sure these new technologies are means for allowing interaction with students, and thanks to this interaction with native speakers online, with people from different places, from talking about issues of interest, of course, meeting with people from people who speak different jargons, different varieties. I'm sure they can develop this communicative competence, linguistic as well as cultural competence, and this is how they can do things on their own. And I think it's a plus. It's a plus. They can do that maybe in parallel to what they do in class, or maybe of course as an alternative to what they are doing in class. So it's going to be more benefit. It's allowing more opportunities for people to study whenever they like, wherever they like, and this is something that is encouraged by students in general, but also, and of course, the dear students following this presentation of the Hermes. Now, the use of technologies has demonstrated its impact, of course, on the promotion of autonomous learning, of course, and this can be supported by Jenks 2009, among others, who stresses the use of the internet for promoting independent language learning, and who says the internet has in many ways facilitated the globalization of English by allowing people from all over the world with different linguistic and cultural backgrounds to communicate with each other according to Warshuwer 1999, quoted in Jinx 2009. So I think Warshuwer has done a great amount of research and has been known for working on new technologies for autonomous learning for people who are interested in working on this approach for autonomous learning. Now, however, we cannot say that if students are cannot take it for granted that students can just be offered new technologies and they can develop this autonomy. It's not true. Of course, they need to be equipped with these strategies I mentioned before. They should be, it's a prerequisite. They should be equipped with these tools, with these strategies, planning, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. Because without these three strategies, they may not be able to make these correct choices. They may not be able to assess the kind of things they need from these websites. They may not be able to be critical and to sift the things they need, the things they may not need, the things that are appropriate, the things that are important for what they study. I think it's only through critical thinking and reflection on what they can see on these websites that they can make correct choices.
Professor SBAIHI?
The promotion of autonomy may be challenging sometimes. We are all believe. Yes, we all believe.
Yes, we lost you for a second. Yes, the voice.
Okay.
Went out for a second.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Now we can hear you.
You can hear me now? Great.
Yes.
So as I said, we cannot assume, we cannot just say and just say that maybe offer these new technologies, maybe laptops or mobiles, and we can develop this on our own. I think we need to be prepared. We need to be psychologically prepared, okay? We need to have positive attitudes to using technologies for learning, not technology for entertainment. It's good for using it for entertainment, but also it's a plus if we can use it, if we can make it, if we can benefit from these new technologies for something advised to our students and of course as to ourselves as teachers and practitioners in the ALT community. So I think we can benefit from all these online platforms. We can benefit from these websites, from technologies in general only if we are reflective enough and if we can make correct choices about what to study and what not to study. As I said, the promotion of autonomy here, to conclude, is maybe challenging sometimes, but we all believe that students are different. They have different motives, different styles of learning, but as educators, not as teachers. As teachers, as educators, we need to help them grow because teachers are technicians. Educators are people who can help people develop. Now, I said in the beginning, it's autonomous learning for developmental purposes, not just for technical purposes. We need to prepare people for life. We don't not only want to prepare these people for studying this subject or this subject. The professor's role is important in this respect. The role of the professor is to create opportunities for exercising autonomous learning, but these professors can always support with some scaffolding whenever necessary. In short, difficulties and challenges may be overcome, and students of today can develop as autonomous students and responsible citizens with the collaboration not only of professors at university, but the collaboration of parents, teachers, and all actors in the education of future generations. And thank you. Now, for references I have used in this presentation, of course, you can see them in the slide in front. And thank you very much for your attention. And pleased to share with you the talk and to meet with this nice audience and nice and eminent and great professors of Harm Halaz University and all the attendees online. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Belghiti. And thank you,
Professor SBAIHI.
Dear students.
Thank you, Professor SBAIHI, for the very insightful and informative presentation on how through interaction and through the learner training, through the implementation and the use of both the learner-based approach and the technology-based approach, we can help our students become autonomous, foster learner autonomy, responsibility about learning, and ultimately have autonomous, responsible citizens by the end. Yes. Thank you so much. So I guess we can open the floor for questions and comments. Yes. Yes. Any questions? Any comments? I can probably start.
Right.
Yes, yes, go ahead. Aziz?
Yeah.
Abdelaziz Zohri? Mr. Abdelaziz Zohri? Yes?
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, Professor Zohri.
Hello, Professor Zohri.
Everybody. Fine.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you very much, everyone, for this wonderful webinar. I've been kind of invited to some of your webinars. Sounds interesting, providing your knowledge, sharing your knowledge, dear professors, Professor KARFA, Professor Belghiti, and all the other professors who have presented either today or days before. And sounds interesting listening to all these conferences or these presentations. So I think that today you've brought up very, very interesting issues. The issue of providing learners with input, as Professor KARFA has provided. And the last presentation, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of my dear professor who presented the last presentation. Can you just remind me? I don't see the name, I just say hi.
Professor SBAIHI?
SBAIHI, yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah. I'm Professor Abdelaziz Zohri at UNCG Stats.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, and I said that the topics you've presented today are of paramount importance. Share that with all maybe the students who are studying in your master's degree. These are topics that need to be researched, I think, especially the issue of autonomy in Moroccan language classes need to be further researched. I would like to just underline and highlight the theory that Professor KARFA talked about earlier, the noticing theory by Smith. It is an important and highly crucial and critical aspect in the language classroom. The issue of autonomy is also of paramount importance, highly important too for future teachers and professors to promote in classes and classrooms. And the main question I think personally to raise here is, what is the role of the teacher? And what is the role of the learner? I think once we appropriately answer these two questions, we are going to maybe head towards better practices and provide our learners with optimal learning. So for me, the most important thing to highlight is to show learners that their role is to learn, as the role of the teacher is to teach. To my mind, learners today, at least some of them, we're not going to generalize or overgeneralize the idea, but a lot of them do not understand what learning means. So when it comes, for example, to noticing is an important thing. I have always talked about it in my classrooms and my classes and to my students. I think that teachers should make it explicit. This is the role of teachers as far as I think, and to my mind. Teachers need to make it explicit to students that noticing is important, and they need to model to them what noticing is, because we all were and we are still learners of English. So teachers need to delve back into their experiences when they were learners of English, because most of them have succeeded, not all of them of course, have succeeded in mastering the language. So they need to go back to their past experience and show these students how they have used noticing as a skill to improve their English. And they have to make it explicit to students what noticing is about. So thank you, Professor KARFA, for bringing this up. And I think that it is now the students who are in your master's degree and other students who are studying applied linguistics and language teaching should take the lead. When it comes to autonomy, a lot of people get it wrong. So Professor SBAIHI tried to highlight the main concepts and elements in autonomy. Learners' autonomy is not just about becoming, let's say, independent. Autonomy is a process. It's very important to highlight it as a process. And it is also important to maybe turn learners' attention to the types of skills that they need to develop in order to develop autonomy. So for me, I would like to just mention cognitive skills, focus on cognitive skills, but also focus on skills related to psychological skills, related to students' beliefs about learning, what students think of learning, their beliefs, their attitudes. Because as I said, why did I try to make this distinction between teaching and learning? It's just because a lot of students they overlook the fact that the role in a language classroom is to learn, and learning it's themselves who should take that is to say, it's them who should learn. They have to take the initiative. This is the idea. Take the initiative and learn. And thank you very much. Thank you if I was late. If I was long then. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zuhri. Yes. Yes, Professor Slawi. Yes.
Very much, Professor Zuhri, for these clarifications and addition. I have just one small addition to what our colleague Abdelaziz Zuhri said. Yes, we need to talk about the role of the teacher and to talk about the role of the learner, what role each one of them has. But we also have to think of the relationship between teacher and students in interaction and in classroom interaction. So the role of this relationship is also, I think, very outstanding and very crucial in the classroom interaction process. This is just a small remark, focusing on the relationship between the teacher and the student. Okay, yeah, thank you, Professor Karim.
Thank you, Professor Slawi. Yes, Professor SBAIHI, would you like to react?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Slawi, Professor Zuhri from Casablanca. I was really glad to listen to you, to your comments. Thank you. You talked about the role of teachers and students. Yes. Now, as I said, learner autonomy is not something that's about learning in isolated from the society. I said that people are sociable. They are always connected, and they should be connected. Abderrahim Elkarfa talked about the need for interaction. Without interaction, we cannot go on with the learning process. We cannot benefit from each other. We cannot learn, in other words. Now, the teacher role is very important in this case, And his role is to support, not to spoon feed students. He is to help students learn, but not to teach. Now, and for the strategies you said, I call them strategies, and I call them 3 strategies according to WIND in 1991: planning, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. And they're also called self-managerial skills, which are the same: planning, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. Now, for the beliefs, I talked about beliefs, and I said attitudes, raising awareness of students. We cannot say give opportunities to students and say, of course, we want you to be independent. We want you to detach from us as teachers, and they can do it. No, you should convince them. They have the exam waiting. They have confidence in what they do, on their teachers. They have confidence on relying on their peers. So how can they detach from their peers? How can they detach from their professors? They are used to. So it's a culture, as I said. It's a culture. It's a culture that started at home, that started before the classroom, before university. So I think for us as practitioners, we have to change these beliefs. We have to change these attitudes. So this is what I meant by the psychological preparation of students. That's step 1. Step 2 is the technical preparation. Technical preparation, which opts for what? Opts for training students. And I talked about 2 approaches. The first one is preparing students and enabling them or equipping them with the 3 strategies. And approach number 2 is, among other approaches, of course, and approach number 2 is the technology-based approach. So I talked about the psychological, which is caring for beliefs of students, attitudes, and also the technical one. Of course, the role of the teacher is always there. The role of the teacher is to support, to scaffold, to support students till they can stand on their feet. We cannot leave them alone. Of course, even today as professors, we cannot always be independent. We cannot rely on ourselves 100%. I said it's a continuum. So there are times when we need to depend on people. There are times when we need to depend on peers, on our professors, on our supervisors. This is very normal. We cannot say that we can be independent all the time, but from time to time, depending on situations and depending on circumstances. And thank you, Professor Zohri, Professor Belghiti. Thank you.
Yes, Professor Belghiti.
Yes, any other questions? Yes?
Yes, Professor Belghiti. Yes, please.
Yes, I'm talking. Yes. Sure.
Yes,
Sure.
I'm Mr. Nadif.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I would like to thank Professor, can you remind me? Professor Mohamed. Yes, for Mohamed SBAIHI. I would like to thank you very much for your insightful presentation. I would like to
With
thank
pleasure.
The organizer, Professor Elkarfa, and our moderator, Professor Belghiti, as well as the other professors who are attending the webinars. I would like also to thank doctoral students and master students also for enlightening this event. Well, Professor SBAIHI, you have mentioned in your presentation.
Could you please speak up?
Yes,
could you please speak up?
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, SBAIHI.
Yes.
It's very, focused, and it highlights very pertinent concepts in the promotion and the implementation of learner autonomy. In your presentation, you have mentioned autonomy, you have mentioned the responsibility and independence. Yes.
Yes.
Would you mind please clarifying these concepts in order to make some distinction between these terms?
Thank you.
My second question is related to a question that was a long time asked by Professor Wakrim. Are we teaching learners, or are we helping them to learn? Yes. Do you think that learner autonomy nowadays, after these decades of calls from different scholars and researchers in the field in order to enhance learner autonomy, do you think that there are positive I mean, practical changes in achieving learner autonomy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
God bless
Mr. Nadif. I think I'm going to answer these two questions by
Yes.
Professor Nadif. I think the first one is, of course, clarifying the terminology of these three words, these three terms, autonomy, independence, and responsibility. Of course, if you go through the literature, of course, especially Dickens in 1987, talks about these three terms and says that they are used interchangeably, especially autonomy and independence. They are used interchangeably. Now, as I said, we cannot become autonomy, as I said, is a state of being, but it's also a process. We should not see it as a state, as being independent only, but as a process, as Professor Zuhri talked about, as a developmental process. Now, it's a developmental process through which we can move on further, step by step, okay? Step by step. Now, responsibility is a state, is a value. It's one of the values that we can assume in this society. I think if we can depend on ourselves, if we cannot depend on others all the time, I think we may be responsible citizens doing things for ourselves, not depending on people all the time. I think it's a value that should be promoted as well. Now, are we teaching? This is a question, second question. Are we teaching learners or are we helping them learn? I think we should switch from teaching, being technicians and not caring about them as human beings, but we should help them learn. We should believe in their powers. We should believe in their powers. They have certain powers. We should only trigger these powers. We should only support them to achieve the preset objectives. These preset objectives which are shared objectives and which are not only the responsibility of language teachers. So the teaching learning process or the success in the teaching learning process is not the responsibility of teachers only, but it is a shared process. However, I think if we are to switch roles from feeders or spoon feeders or teachers as technicians, I think we have to assume new roles. We have to support our students. We have, I think, and this depends on the way these teachers, some teachers may not believe in this autonomy as that we are talking about today. So it's a culture. Learner autonomy depends on teacher autonomy. The question you may need to ask is, are our teachers autonomous? Of course they are autonomous, but to what extent? That's the question. Question one. Two, are we offering, now here we are going to talk about textbook design, we are going to talk about material development, we're going to talk about didactic tools employed in classroom, we have to talk about the use of new technologies in the language classrooms. So these are the questions that we need to ask as practitioners. Are we encouraging these these materials which trigger noticing that Abderrahim talked about? Are we offering students the kind of materials that encourage participation or interaction that Abderrahim talked about before? Now, I think the question is that we have to believe in the powers that our students have. Students are not dumb, no, they are intelligent and they have different levels of intelligence and different types of intelligence. So therefore, we have to offer a variety of materials so that to cater for all these types, all these styles, and we have to lead them, to guide them so that they can stand on their feet, as I said, so that they can develop, they can grow as independent students in the language classroom, but also as independent citizens in this nice society. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor SBAIHI. Yes, any other questions? Any other comments?
Yes, can I please?
Yes, yes, Professor Razi, yes.
I'm very sorry because this topic is so important.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Hello?
You have,
Do you hear
yeah,
me?
Karima, you have C. Souri and C. Ghazi Asdin.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
I'm
Yes,
Azdin
you
Ghazi,
can,
professor at the University of Qadi Ayad.
yeah, Professor
I'm glad to
Ghazi.
hear you. First of all, I would like to thank Professor
Asdin
Abderrahim
Ghazi,
KARFA.
you are most welcome. We are very happy having
Okay,
you.
thank you very
among
much.
us
Thank you very much. I
this
just
evening.
only this opportunity to
A
thank
big
you
thank
about
you
your
to you. Yeah.
interesting presentation on interaction hypothesis, which is very important for foreign languages acquisition. I am working on Arabic as foreign language, for instance, as approach to develop the language proficiency, face-to-face interaction and communication. I have only a very quick question, very and short comment. How I would like to ask you, how can, for instance, use this interaction hypothesis to optimize the online e-learning classroom? In one hand, and other hand, how can students get the correct meaning and the feedback meaning from the input? I mean here in this interaction hypothesis in using in online and different e-learning platforms, which with concordance means concordance to the from the input to output, means that between input and output certain meaning which can be get by students. The second question dedicated to Professor SBAIHI is about we know that we are living now some increasing technologies which using digital platforms and using different approaches, I mean pedagogical approaches. I would like to ask you about the cognitive skills. How can we optimize cognitive skills with using, for instance, this some dynamical systems and I mean also dynamical cognitive systems. And thank you very much. Only some thank.
Yes. Professor SBAIHI and Professor
Yes, thank you.
Kharfan would like to react.
Thank you, Professor Belghiti. Now I have a question from Mr. Azdin Ghazi. Now it's about cognitive skills and how can new technologies empower cognitive skills of language students. It's true that new technologies are, as I said, a plus. They cannot be a substitute, but they are a plus. They are to support what we are doing in the language classroom. Therefore, they are of some support to language teachers. They are of some support to textbook designers. They are of great support to the language, to the English language community. I think we can depend on these new technologies, and of course we can learn from them independently outside the language classroom. Now, of course, I think through this interaction with new technologies, I think we can sharpen our brains. We can activate our minds. We can reflect on what can be done, what cannot be done, what we can assess Of course, I think it's through working on these analytical procedures with the machine in front of us, with the people we communicate with online, I think we can enhance the cognitive skills of our language students. I think, as I said before, it cannot replace face-to-face, but online platforms allow for a more authentic, more real, more meaningful, more purposeful opportunities for language learning. I think the case of the language classroom sometimes offer language students with artificial, fabricated learning material. I think online it's direct, it's more purposeful. There is a purpose. I think somebody calls someone, talks, interacts with somebody else outside, of course, his home. That can be natural, more meaningful. There's a meaningful message. There's this gap, this what you call this information gap. There is this purpose. There is this real audience, but not, of course, as it is the case with while working on a textbook dialogue, John and Jack, just on paper. That's for teaching purposes, but not for meaningful purposes. I think for promoting the communicative competence of students, we have to consider the materials we are using in class. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. SBAIHI.
Professor Karima?
Yes, any other? Yes.
Some
Yes,
more
Professor.
questions for learners' autonomy and learner-centeredness. Once again, I think the following two seminars are on. The first one next Sunday, Sunday or Tuesday. One of them is on learners' autonomy, autonomous learning, and learning. The following one, or the first one, one of them, is on learners and learning strategies. Okay, so we will have time to bring most of the seminars, previous seminars, together to discuss learners' autonomy, autonomous learning, not only teaching and helping teaching students to learn, but learning to learn. Okay, so more focus.
Yeah.
We will talk about these issues within a wide context. Okay, within a wide theoretical.
Yes, in a more thorough way.
Yeah, the theories and the theories that we have been overviewing and talking about within the context of e-learning, because we talked about e-learning and distance learning, blended classrooms. 5 seminars were devoted to e-learning, and the first one was like language awareness, another one, assessment, many. Okay, so the next 2 seminars, we will have enough time to debate issues related to learners' autonomy and to teachers' autonomy, etc. Okay, if you have Professor Karima 2 or 3 questions, more questions, then why not?
Yes.
And start thinking of closing up the to let our colleagues and students have a rest.
Okay. So probably 2 more questions, and we can call it a day. 2 more questions, probably. Yes.
You want to ask a question? You wanted to ask a question.
Sorry,
I think you are. You wanted to ask a question, Professor Karima.
Yes.
You wanted to ask a question.
You have the right to.
Yes, the question that I wanted to ask actually was about the use of technology for language learning that Professor SBAIHI mentioned. Now, what I wanted to focus on, though, is we know that our students now resort to what we call informal learning. So they're already resorting to technology in a way or another. It's with respect to learning foreign languages or to assist them in some aspect of learning the foreign language. But I'm wondering how that is making them autonomous, because when they come again to the classroom, it's the same rhythm, you know, there's still this over reliance on us. So I was just wondering, how should we use it differently? How should we use it in a way that would make it actually make them autonomous? If they are using it on their own and it's not, I don't want to say it's not working. We need to do research to do that, but it's based on what we observe happening in our classes. So how would you suggest they should use it in a way that would make them or contribute into helping them become more autonomous learners?
Thank you.
They are already using it. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Belghiti, for your nice question, and about the use of new technologies for independent language learning. Now, you can say that new technologies are always an alternative to what we do in class. They can be an alternative, they can be some support, extra learning outside the language classroom. So it's always good, it's always a plus, and it should be welcomed by students and by professors. Now, new technologies can be used either formally, as you said, informally, as we all know, but they can be formalized, as we are doing today. Now, it's an formal online session. It's not a chat room. It is very formal. There are some rules, and there are some formal ways, and there are some certain rules that we have to respect, all of us here in this online webinar. Now, how can we benefit from it? How can we make it? As I said, we can benefit from these online sessions, either informally or formally. How can we benefit from these online sessions? How can we benefit from these these technologies? And can we assume responsibility, as you said? I think the answer is very clear. I think if our students are aware of the benefits of these technologies, that's the value of using technology, that the culture of using technology for learning in addition to entertainment, that's one. So it's to do with beliefs, to do with attitudes, that's one. I think we have to change attitudes as students, as parents, as teachers, that's one. Two, I think if we are prepared, technically prepared, that is, as Abderrahim just mentioned, learning how to learn. If we are equipped with the tools of learning how to learn, and I mentioned before the 3 strategies of Winden 1991, I think we may be able to succeed. We may be, because with planning, we may be able to make the correct choices. What am I going to study? When am I going to study? I think for university, it is the department which decides. It's the professor which decides on the content, on the process, on the tools to use. I think if we can detach from these professors, from this university, and we can think for ourselves, we can reflect on the things we have, we can reflect on the time we have, if we can reflect on the conditions we are offered, I think we can make correct choices, what to study, where to study, and how to study. It's only based on assessment and reflection of all these issues, I think we can make correct and appropriate decisions, whether in class or whether online. Thank you.
Thank
yes,
you.
thank you. Professor Karima?
Yes?
Yeah, Professor Karima, I would like just to maybe to set the ground for the next seminar for the relationship between autonomy, independence, and responsibility. Yes, my colleagues and students, you can ask me next seminar. They are used interchangeably, but there are slight differences between them. I think autonomy is attitude and personality traits oriented. It is a personality trait. psychological, social, etc. Readiness. Independence is action-oriented, that is independent action. And responsibility is a value because we are not talking about institutions or public figures. We are talking about learners. That sense of responsibility, that sense of self-criticism, self-evaluation, okay? So it is a value-oriented. Independent action is also action-oriented. And the first one, autonomy, is personal interest oriented. But the three concepts are used to talk about what Professor SBAIHI has mentioned so far, culture, okay? Because there is culture in whatever we do, okay? Culture, institutional culture, the school culture, the university culture, the family culture, okay? How much or to what extent those contexts enhance the chances to develop as an autonomous, independent, and responsible person and citizen. Thank you very much. I would like, yes, Karima, because you will close together with Professor Slawi.
Yes.
Once again, I would like to address a very big thank you word to all students, master students and patient students, and to my colleagues from the Department of English Darwin Affairs and the Department of English Science, and from all departments of English, from all universities, okay, for joining us and sharing with us their experiences. I don't want to forget Professor Azdin Ghazi from Qadi Ayyad University and Professor Zuhri from Hassan I University and Professor Jami Abdelmajid from Hassan I University, Hassan I Stat, yes, I'm talking about Stat, and Professor Fatim Zahra Kurroum from Mohamed V University, and of course, Aziz Khalid Tayyib Ghurdu, Professor Madani, Professor SBAIHI, all Amqran, Professor Daudi, all of you. And thank you very much, Professor Karima, for assuming
my pleasure, Professor.
Doing this, moderating, taking care of what's going on, you know, the comments and questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Slawi, for your patience and efforts. Thank you all. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Karima.
Yes, I will give the floor to Professor Slawi, and then we will close up. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor
SBAIHI.
Professor Abderrahim, for allowing me this opportunity to talk in front of this nice audience from different parts of the country and perhaps beyond frontiers. I could see somebody from Saudi Arabia has joined recently. So it's a great pleasure to meet with all of you, teachers, professors, students, and researchers in this community. And it was really glad to share with you and talking to you about learner autonomy. Professor Slawi and Professor Aziz Zuhri from Casablanca, and all professors. I'm sorry if I cannot see your names in front of me, but all of the professors and students at Dar Mehrez and outside. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, Professor SBAIHI.
Thank you, Professor SBAIHI.
Thank you so much.
Interesting
with pleasure.
Presentation.
With pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, professors.
With pleasure.
Yes, Professor Slawi.
Okay, thank you very much, dear colleague Karima Belghati, for moderating, for the good moderation of this webinar.
Thank you, Professor.
I would like to warmly thank Professor KARFA for putting us all together in this series of fantastic webinars on very timely and hot issues about language teaching and language learning issues. I would like to thank my colleagues from the Department of English, each one by his or her name. I also would like to thank my dear students for their enormous efforts and for being up to date with all those issues assigned to them and the presentation they give. You are doing excellent job. Congratulations. I also would like to thank all my colleagues all over from different universities of Morocco, and I would like especially to thank my ex-PhD student, and who is now a university professor in Saudi Arabia, Professor Dr. Nawal Kubaiti, who kindly accepted to join us in this webinar. And we wish the success for the rest of the webinars. Thank you all, and see you then on next session, inshallah.
So I would like again, one more time, to thank Professor Elkarfa for these webinars and for the opportunity he gave us all to be involved and to participate and to share what we know and to learn a lot. Thank you, Professor Elkarfa. Thank you, Professor SBAIHI, our guest speaker today, for the knowledge again you shared with us all. It was very insightful, very informative. Thank you, Professor Slawi, for the amazing job you've been doing. Again, for all the efforts devoted in the MA program, Applied Language Studies and Research in Higher Education. I would like to thank our students for the excellent job they've done, presenting and taking initiatives again, discussing the issue with us, and showing actually that students can be autonomous, they can be responsible, they could be active. So thank you for that. You've done a good job.
Thank you so much.
I would like also to thank my professors present here and our colleagues from our university, our department, and from other universities and departments who joined us today. It's always enriching to have other professors and other colleagues join us from different universities and departments around Morocco. So thank you all for the amazing webinar again today. Another amazing webinar, and I'll tell you goodbye for another yet amazing webinar to come, inshallah. It's going to be, I think, on Sunday. Right, Professor Elkarfa?
Sunday, yeah.
It's on Sunday, yes.
Okay, Kalima, please allow me to say one word if you don't mind.
Sure, Professor, yes.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I was so excited and I forgot to warmly thank our speaker, our guest speaker, Professor SBAIHI, for the outstanding presentation and lecture he gave. So I'm so sorry.
With pleasure, Professor.
Last but not least,
it's with great pleasure.
Thank you for accepting to talk to our students, and also for contributing to this MA program by teaching with us one of the modules in this MA program. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Professor Slawi. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we will be seeing him again on Sunday, I guess, right?
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So looking forward to seeing you again and to learn from you again. So thank you.
With pleasure. With your pleasure. With your pleasure, Professor Barghiti, Professor Slawi. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Abderrahim. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Time.